Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual, and the Ottawa Citizen is trying to foster some vaccine demand. Here it is. Their tweet says, "Waiting is the hardest part. A year into the pandemic, COVID fatigue has given way to vaccine envy." And I say, vaccine envy. And I linked a video of London singing, "You can stick your vaccine up your..." It's quite catchy, really. You should go play it. I'm not going to play it here. I think it's, I don't know, they'll probably ding my video or something like that. But anyway, it's worth listening to. But I think it's interesting that the Ottawa Citizen is trying to, usually, if people were excited and enthusiastic, maybe there wouldn't be spots left over in Toronto at the last minute on a weekend, right? When we've had vaccines rolling out for the last, I don't know, weeks now. Are people really that interested, or is that just what the media is telling us? Who to believe? Who indeed, right? I don't know. Here is Trish Wood. She says, "How are we supposed to trust the media, big pharma, and public health when the story changes literally every 24 hours? AstraZeneca vaccine is 100% effective against COVID, study finds." Oh, thank goodness. This is a Daily Mail study. We're not going to look at the article. I just think it's funny. Now, I did come across an article to prove my point here that had AstraZeneca at 79% effective. But I'm not going to show that. I'm just going to show you the changing recommendations, because it's not just about effectiveness. Okay, I'll show you the 79 one too. Hold on. So here's the 79% effective that I guess I saw. This was the top Google result, so that's where I referenced my 79%. So it's not a UK trial, but 79 effective in a late UK or US trial, right? And this was published, when was this published? March 22nd. So today is the 22nd. So figure that one out, right? So interesting in that today they're saying that the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine is 100% effective in this one study. So, I mean, great for that study. To further illustrate the changing story about effectiveness and about who should get this thing, here is the March 1st article. It says, March 1st, 2021, AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine not recommended in people over 65, or 65 and older. The NACI, that's the National Advisory Committee on Immunization. That's it. And so that was on March 1st. And then on March 15th, NACI to say AstraZeneca vaccine okay for those over age 65. Yay! What changed? They said they saw 17 million people were fine with it in the UK. I wonder how many of those people were over 65. I don't know. And I don't know. I don't. Here is procurement minister bragging about getting more doses of AstraZeneca. And Paulch says, "Why would Canada accept a vaccine that the US has not approved? Canada approved the ones from India, not from Europe." Interesting. I don't know if there's a difference. Between, like, if AstraZeneca makes the vaccine, is it not the same formula wherever you get it from? I understand there was a bad batch in Austria, and we don't have that bad batch until we take delivery of this. Maybe? But I don't know exactly. And I mean, like, it's so muddy now. Like, it's so muddy to the point of we're in a new frame of reference. We're in a new state of being, whole new problems, right? Is it the India version of the AstraZeneca vaccine? Oh, is it the South African version of the COVID? Is it the B117? No? Oh, which AstraZeneca vaccine did you get? Which vaccine did you get? AstraZeneca? Which one? Oh, Moderna, Pfizer? Oh, did you get both or just one? How many days apart? Was it 21 days apart, 28 days apart, 90 days apart, 112 days apart? The recommended manufacturer dose is up to, it was originally 45 days. It was up to 45 days. It was originally 21 days, can stretch to 45 if there's problems with supply. Then Quebec stretched it to 90 days, 3 months. And then Canada and ACI just said, yeah, they could do it in 4 months, whatever. And I've heard of people with even longer. Like 4 months and a week is the longest I've heard. Just to be clear, even longer. That's what even longer means. So we're in a whole new state of being. We can't even get back to, like, how effective are masks? How effective are these NPIs, which are non-pharmaceutical interventions, the social distancing masks? I shouldn't call them masks. They're suffocating devices, because masks have to have air holes, right? Like in your Halloween mask that's regulated by the country and the province by experts who know what they're talking about with masks. They have to have air holes, right? I wonder Does it say masks on them? Medical masks. Medical masks classified as something different? I should have asked Chris. I'll have to ask him again. I'll have to talk to him again. So anyway, whole new state of being, whole new set of problems, whole new set of expenses, whole new set of infrastructure to pay for. And guess who's on the hook for paying for it? You and I. And AstraZeneca, who knows? Who knows? Because the conversation is like the people making the choices are not the NACI. They're just making the recommendations. And then the provinces can make whatever choices they want. Quebec said 4 months. Ontario said, I think 4 months now too. There were places out west that had 21 days, then 28 days, then 45 days, right? People are having their second shot rescheduled, right? People have had their first shot and they're getting calls and saying, oh, okay, you'll have your next shot somewhere down the road, July, right? This is wild. This has not been tested, right? What's the efficacy? Oh, they don't care. Whole new set of problems. And I'm sure they care, because if they can say 100%, well, they said that anyway. They said that anyway. It's 100% effective. Could you back that up, please? This guy says. This guy thinks so. This study says, right? Goodness me. So that's where we're at. And how do we... it's like... You've seen Christmas Vacation, right? And if you haven't seen Christmas Vacation, I'm talking about the part where he hands the ball of obviously very tangled Christmas lights to the eldest son. Here you go, Russ. And he's like, oh my God, I have to untangle this. Trying to get to the truth of this matter. We're in a whole new state of being, meaning that a whole new set of problems to be solved by the logistics people, by the all sorts of people. Oh, we have to get this rolled out. We have to do this and that. So they're not going to unwind that ball of string, because they have new jobs to work on. Getting to the truth of this becomes a bottom priority. It's not something they're interested in. And it's just as difficult to get to the truth of the matter. Who said what? Who decided what? Where are the emails? Where's the signature? Where's the agreement? What's the timeline on the agreement? Like, unwinding this takes a long time. And people aren't motivated to do that, because if they screwed up or if they're wrong, I mean, they're basing all of their current actions on what they did previously to be correct. But getting to the truth of it, very difficult, very muddy. Right? Here's an interesting little tidbit, right? What if the person who's in charge of it dies? Dr. Jose Besegla, sorry if I got that, I've probably got that terribly wrong, I'm sorry. The chief scientist at AstraZeneca has died unexpectedly at 61. No cause of death has yet been reported. Actually, he died, according to the reports that have come out since, of a rare brain disorder that usually takes 6 months to kill someone, apparently. And I saw images of him yesterday at like doing press and doing conversations for promotion of the vaccine for COVID-19, etc. So I'm not necessarily saying anything nefarious happened here, but did he get the vaccine? That was one question. Like, did he have the vaccine? When was he vaccinated? At what point was he vaccinated? Has he had a COVID test? Is this a COVID death? There's just a couple of questions off the top of my head. They said that he died of, I said this already, but they said he died of a rare brain disease. Again, usually takes 6 months to kill somebody. And there was no real indication that was happening for him in like December 2020, January 2020 from images hold on. I've got a word that's missing. Transcripts of meetings he was in January. Has like the writing part where they write down what happens in meetings, not minutes, but like transcripts. It didn't seem like he had a brain injury or was suffering from anything like that. Now, it could go undiagnosed and kill someone. Certainly. Stranger things have happened, and I'm not saying one way or the other, but I have questions. Certainly. And questions that I don't think we're going to get answers for. Very interesting, right? Very interesting. Chris Sky was on Zuby. He was on InfoWars as well. The end of this is very interesting. He talks, Chris Sky, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, but it was in my list again, and I can't remember exactly what I wanted to talk about, so I'll mention this again. The end of this, he talks about how this gene therapy changes your genes to create a spike protein to fight off COVID-19. And his logic is sound to me. Like, if I'm wrong, I'm interested in knowing if I'm wrong, but the last point he makes, there's 3 clips in this 2-minute little interview here, and the third clip is the one I'm talking about, where he's talking about how they say it's not a gene therapy, and he says, well, how then does it change to fight this spike protein then? And it's kind of a checkmate, in my opinion. It's very logical thinking, and I think it's correct. But like yesterday, I asked, what's wrong with this river, cutting out the river thing and the power generation? Somebody said to me, like, to scale this up, it's not feasible. It's not feasible. And if your laptop, or if you always have to go to battery backup and your YouTube light went off every time the river stopped giving power to the 15 or 20 houses it could work with one of those things, then you'd be kind of ticked off, right? So you'd always need the oil and gas backup. So the benefit is not the cost benefit is not good for that. So I like if I'm wrong, if my logic, if me looking at this and goes, and my conclusion is he's right, is incorrect, I'd like to know that. And it's the same with the climate change thing. If these things aren't feasible, I'd really like to know why, because then I understand it better, right? And I feel like the honest discussion and people being wrong, like you have to take a chance to be wrong, because that's the only way you learn, right? So the thing missing from the discussion about climate change is the feasibility of most of this. Like if you want the lights on in your school, if you want the lights on in your home, if you want the heat to stay on in the winter, you have to be in a situation where you can provide power 24/7 uninterrupted without any kind of question. And oil and gas supply that, and everything else doesn't. It's that simple. Like it's really that simple, period. Anyway, logic. I'd like to know if my logic is flawed. I think Crystal's logic on the last point is spot on. And if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Thanks. Here is a $100,000 contest to got a creative idea to promote COVID-19 vaccines in your community. Getting a vaccine is one of the best ways to protect against COVID-19 and other serious infectious diseases. Ooh, other serious infectious diseases, not just COVID-19. Anyway, they're promising, according to Randy Hillier, join the COVID lottery, see how creative you can be to scare people, and you're in the running for $100,000 from our government. Just follow the science. Hey, yay! We're all out of ideas, and people seem to be really angry at us. Do you have any ideas? The public? We'll give you $100,000. Sorry guys, my consultations run $250,000 and up. Plus, I'd really like an SNC Lavalin yacht. Okay, I want the side of it to say SNC Lavalin. That's right. That's the SS SNC Lavalin. I mean, if you give Gaddafi a yacht, you can at least promise taxpayers a yacht, right? Like Jeepers Creepers. $100,000? Come on. How much do you value this information? How much do you really want the public on your side? I don't know. It's not enough. I've talked before getting into lockdowns. I've talked before about how they've been monitoring wastewater. So they've been using monitoring of wastewater and testing the wastewater to justify locking down our society. They're using it to lock you in your homes and put you under house arrest. I don't think that's appropriate. And anyway, Jean-Marc Benoit says, percent positivity of PCR tests and sewage PCR. The reason for Ottawa Public Health choosing this data point is probably science. Notice that the curves are similar, which means something. When the curves are not similar, that means nothing unless it does. This is Jean-Marc Benoit, and he's a doctor, emergency physician who really likes graphs, fraud and truth in healthcare, trying to tone down the sarcasm. Okay, so I tagged him because he's pointing out something that should be more widely known and is not more widely known, right? Like, they don't have permission to do this, and they're doing it anyway. And they're using anonymous cell phone data to monitor people's compliance with staying at home. They don't have permission to do this, but they're doing it. How do you stop that, right? Again, think the giant ball of Christmas lights. Think of untwining it to find the truth, and think of bureaucrats who created the ball of lights, bureaucrats and elected officials, etc., who created the ball of lights, and who really would rather you just left it. Just leave it be. We don't need to look into that. That is a very complex subject. You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand all the emails. Sorry, you just wouldn't get it. And they don't answer questions they don't like, right? Thank goodness for freedom of information. Okay, here is an online, this is getting into lockdowns. And Ontario students last year at the end of their high school didn't get to have a graduation because COVID-19, because I think we were still heavily locked down at that point in time, which is unfortunate. And so they did a virtual online graduation, which is not the same. And they're going to do it again. Here's Lisa, and she says, she's quoting the article, it's a CBC. For the second time, Ontario schools planned for online graduation, CBC News. And this is a quote from the article. You walk into high school and you look towards your future, you look towards prom and graduation, said 17-year-old Terzo. When you find out that it might be virtual, you won't get to wear your cap and gown and throw your cap up. It's very upsetting. Yeah, like you don't get to, this is stolen pieces of life. And we'll look at another stolen piece of life before the end of this segment as well. But it's terrible when it happens to kids. It's terrible when it happens to adults. and more compounded by the small intrusions into their personal ability to choose about their own body, right? Masking them and taking that decision away from them. They don't get to be exempt unless their parents tell them they're exempt. And I'll tell you, not many kids' parents tell them they're exempt. So think about like when you're alone in your office and you take your mask off and you can breathe freely and you're like, oh, thank goodness I don't have to do it all day. And your kid does, right? Your kid does, because they're being watched by multiple people who have power complexes because they work in schools and they've got power over kids. Hey, you put that mask back on, put that mask back on, right? Can you imagine being corrected all the time? It's a terrible, awful thing, right? Giving them the power back. But having those intrusions into their everyday personal space and body autonomy, and also having a situation where they're having major life events impacted and removed for the audacity that they are human in nature, right? That they have connection and they have lots of people congregated in a gymnasium. It's safe. It's safe. How many kids have gotten this thing? Very, very few. It is very, very concerning. What we're willing to justify, what we're willing to lose, what we're justifying to ourselves is okay to lose in order for safety when they can't promise safety. Not even a little bit they can't promise it. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's a lie. Here is Ivor Cummings. I saw a tweet where they said this was removed. It's not removed. You can see the video here, the whole video. But Governor DeSantis in Florida, sorry, this is playing here, shouldn't be. Governor DeSantis in Florida says, a must watch and a must retweet, to be honest. Excerpts from the USA Florida Governor DeSantis public hearing on lockdown effectiveness, bringing in the top experts from Harvard, Stanford, and Oxford universities. The data is now in. The answer is clear. And this one, it says, I think that lockdowns are the single biggest public health mistake in history, have led to many, many unnecessary deaths, both directly and indirectly. Both directly and as a result of the lockdowns, and also indirectly through this misplaced faith in the ability of the lockdowns to meaningfully stop anything. Okay, here's a quick little excerpt.
I think the lockdowns are the single biggest public health mistake in history. I think the lockdowns have as Martin said, have failed to protect the vulnerable. The lockdowns has led to many, many, many unnecessary deaths.
That is probably too quiet, so I apologize for that. Here's another excerpt, and this is just on contact tracing. I was taking a picture. I am taking a picture every day of our public health, and at the beginning of my picture taking, they had contact tracing and contacts that have been traced. We haven't done contact. I think they're still paying contact tracers, but the contact tracers aren't doing anything. Not meaningful anyway. This is not a big part of the public health response. And here, these health experts in this health discussion say contact tracing isn't the right time to do this for, and it's the wrong kind of disease to do this for. Like Ebola, you'd need that. No. Here we go.
A recognition that maybe this wasn't as effective, but what are your thoughts on how effective contact tracing's been?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I learned quite a bit from Martin and Jay on contact tracing, this was just the wrong time, the wrong type of disease to do that. We already had, the CDC early on was estimating that probably tenfold higher number of people were infected than was reported. And once you have tens of millions of people with an illness, that's not the time you start contact tracing. I'm not an expert on contact tracing, the gentlemen on the panel are, but I mean, that was just a completely wrong strategy and unfortunately the wrong model on how to deal with this. And so there was a tremendous amount of not only misallocation of resources, but I think the problem became the fear in the public. It was sort of like the fear was another contagion.
Aha, yes, the fear was another contagion, unfortunately. So you can check that out. I think that there's a lot of interesting information there. I haven't watched all of it. Here's some UK known thinkers weighing in. Peter Hitchens says, why has this expert voice not been heeded? Dr. John Lee, the effects of lockdown are catastrophic. And here is, oh, okay. We'll look at John Lee in just a minute. First, we'll look at Hitchens' own column. Okay, so this is by Peter Hitchens himself. The next one's John Lee. Is shutting down Britain with unprecedented curbs on ancient liberties really the best answer? Some years ago, I had the very good luck to fall into the hands of a totally useless doctor. It was hell and nearly worse than that, but it taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. He was charming, gray-haired, smooth, and beautifully dressed. He was standing in for my usual GP, a shabbier, more abrasive man. I went to him with troubling, persistent pain in a tender place. He prescribed an antibiotic. Days passed. It did not work. The pain grew worse. He declared in that case I needed surgery, and the specialist to whom he sent me agreed with barely a glance. I was on the conveyor belt to the operating table. In those days, I believed, as so many do, in the medical profession. I was awed, by their qualifications. Yet the prospect of a rather nasty operation filled me with gloom and doubt. As I waited miserably for the anesthesist in the huge London hospital to which I had been sent, a new doctor appeared. I braced myself for another session of being asked, "Does this hurt?" and replying between clenched teeth that yes, it blinking well did. But this third man was different. He did not ask me pointedly or pointlessly if it hurt. He knew it did. He was, crucially, a thinking man who did not take for granted what he was told. He looked at my notes. He actually read them, which I don't think anyone else had ever had. He swore under his breath. He hurried from the room, only to return shortly afterwards to say I should get dressed and go home. The operation was cancelled. All I needed was a different antibiotic, which he, there and then, prescribed, and which cured the problem in 3 days. He was furious and managed to convey tactfully that the original prescription had been incompetent and wrong. The whole miserable business had been dismal and a frightening mistake. He was sorry. Heavens knows what would have happened if Providence had not brought that third doctor into the room. I still shudder slightly to think of it, but the point was this. A mere title, a white coat, a smooth manner, a winning way with long words and technical jargon will never again be enough for me. It never ever does any harm to question decisions which you think are wrong. If they are right, then no harm will be done. They will be able to deal with your questions. If they are, in fact, wrong, you can save everyone a lot of trouble. I fear, just as a quick aside, that as someone who asks questions that people don't like, I've caused an awful lot of people a lot of trouble. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with my questions causing trouble. I'm just interested in getting to the truth of it. I'm interested in unwrapping that ball of Christmas lights, figuratively. And so here I am, says Hitchens, back to him, asking bluntly, is the close down of the country the right answer for the coronavirus? I'll be accused of undermining the National Health Service and threatening public health and all kinds of other conformist rubbish, but I ask you to join me because if we have this wrong, we have a great deal to lose. We've already lost a year. Already. I don't just address this plea to my readers. I think my fellow journalists should ask the same questions. I think MPs of all parties should ask them when they are urged tomorrow to pass into law a frightening series of restrictions on ancient liberties and vast increases in police state powers. Did you know that the government and opposition had originally agreed that there would not even be a vote on these measures? Even Vladimir Putin might hesitate before doing anything so blatant. If there's no serious rebellion against this plan in the Commons, then I think we can commemorate tomorrow, March 23rd, 2020, as the day Parliament died. It's last year. Yet as far as I can see, the population cares more about running out of the toilet paper. Praise must go to David Davis and Chris Bryant, two MPs who've bravely challenged this measure. So yes, this is a year old. And yeah, March 21st, 2020. And here is 1 year on. Okay? Dr. David Lee, this is what Mr. Hitchens was saying. A year on, this is what we should be thinking about. My darkest predictions have come true. The effects of COVID lockdown are catastrophic. 1 year on from the start of the first lockdown, the brutal price of this drastic policy is all too obvious. Amid battered public finances, rising unemployment, and widespread business failures, entire sectors of the economy have been devastated. At the same time, the quality of life for most of the population has been profoundly diminished, just as education from primary to degree level has been undermined and non-COVID healthcare disrupted. COVID-dominated Britain is a bleak, unnatural land where all our ordinary freedoms are locked away. The advocates of lockdown argue that this approach has been necessary to tackle the unique challenges of coronavirus, but I believe that the heavy-handedness of these measures that has been out of all proportion to the level of threat, and worse, they have also been ineffective, even counterproductive. throughout this long emergency, and the supposed antidote has often been more harmful than the disease itself. The reality is that COVID represents little danger to the vast majority of people under the age of 60, yet our whole society has been upended by an exaggerated response, and the scars will last for many years. In May last year, during the first lockdown, I wrote an essay in this paper which warned of the disastrous consequences of paralyzing authoritarianism in the name of public protection. On the basis of a panic fueled by dubious science, I said, the British economy has been placed in an artificially induced coma, with much of the population under effective house arrest. Given the potential scale of damage to the nation's health and wealth, I described the government's stance as reckless and irrational, and that was before a further 10 months of crippling restrictions. Today, as the Mail's comprehensive, depressing analysis makes clear, my darkest predictions have been realized. From the arts to the retail sector, the impact of successive lockdowns have been catastrophic, wiping out more than 500 million pounds of economic output every day. The tale of misery created by officialdom set out in the Mail's catalogue of wrecked businesses, record debts, worsening hardships, and vanished dreams might be justified if COVID had represented a truly lethal crisis for Britain, killing perhaps 10% of the population and threatening the very fabric of society. But COVID is nothing like the menace on this scale. It is not a new Black Death or Spanish flu, no matter how many doom-laden personal stories are aired by broadcasters. If COVID were a plague, it would be indiscriminate in its targets. Everyone would be at risk, including healthy children and young adults. But that's not the case. As with many infectious diseases, it is mainly elderly and people with chronic health conditions who are at risk. Indeed, the average age of COVID fatalities is over 82, higher than the UK's average age of deaths from all causes. And among those who contract the disease, just 2 in 1,000 or fewer actually die. As soon as they become apparent, such facts should have been part of the wider debate about our COVID response. But unfortunately, we live in a climate of scaremongering and misinformation. Only last week, the BBC, in a typically apocalyptic report, stated that due to COVID, the UK's death rate in 2020 was 7% higher than a normal year. But while every death is a tragedy for bereaved families, 7% above average does not strike me as a particularly shocking figure, especially since some of those deaths were caused by the lockdowns themselves. Yeah, I mean, we're in a situation where we're completely overreacting, and our overreaction is destroying our society. Back to this. What is certain is the damage caused by lockdowns on every front, including economic meltdown, poor mental health, and inhumane neglect of the elderly and dislocated family relationships. Yeah, there's a big consequence to this, and the consequence will be felt by Canadians for years, if not generations, and I hope not. Here is Emily, and she says, can Ford Nation or Dr. Fullerton please explain to my 90-year-old papa who's been isolated in long-term care for 12 months why he can't go outside in this beautiful weather? He's waited all winter. This is inhumane. More life stolen. A year long imprisoned in your long-term care home. Is that passionate? Is that an iron ring around long-term care, making sure they're safe and healthy and comfortable and in a nice place to spend their time? Is this what we do to our elderly? Lock them up and warehouse them until they die? I mean, this isn't appropriate. It just seems like punishing. How dare you get old, right? It's just awful. Mayor John Tory remembers the lives lost to COVID-19 in Toronto with a virtual commemorative ceremony news release here. The problem is he doesn't really address the people who the lockdown affected. Doesn't address the death of the businesses, the destruction of the ability of people to take care of themselves, the cultural impact, the complete change to our entire country, masking versus no masking, the division that it's caused. John Tory is laser focused on making sure you understand that COVID-19 is the most important thing to him and to everybody else, and nothing else will eclipse that. So you better get on board, right? Don't worry about your business or your friends and your family or anything to that effect. Meanwhile, there's ongoing damage as well to people who are working and trying to get through. Here's Roman Babber, and he says, not going to work equals social isolation. This isn't pandemic fatigue. Quote, people are at the point of emotional exhaustion. Public health doesn't look at health holistically. We miss the office. Ford Nation. John Tory must not hold us back any longer. Meaning people miss going to work. They miss seeing their friends and their coworkers, their colleagues, their boss, right? As much as that's maybe there's friction or people are people, and there's always going to be people who don't get along or whatever. But people want to get back to work and see their friends and have like work potlucks and do the things that people do, share in people's joy and support people when they have something to happen that's terrible. This is what people do, and they want to get back to it. And isolating people in their homes and saying it must be good enough for you because if not, you're going to die of COVID is not an acceptable answer to these concerns, right? Here's a U of T professor who, it doesn't look like Mr. Hillier's in this other than being tagged by the person who started this thread. And maybe he's higher up, I don't know. I haven't gone to the thread to look. I thought it was going to be deleted, but I think I clicked it yesterday and it wasn't. But usually by the time I get there today, something like this is deleted. So I'll just show you the picture. But this is a U of T professor of political science who says, no, Randy Hillier. It says, must listen, Holocaust survivor Vera Sharov, today's medical mandates are a major step towards fascist regime and genocide. And then Randy Hillier, Derek Sloan, Maxime Bernier, Ezra Levent, JCCF Canada, Chris Sky, and Rocco Gelati are all tagged. And this political science person, who apparently doesn't know how to use Twitter, says, no, Randy Hillier, you are the fascist here, you utter moron. Nobody will touch your fascist ass with a barge pole, LOL. And then she says, that goes for the rest of you pathetic effers. That's right, a U of T prof of political science called you pathetic effers. Free speech is a marvelous gift, is it not? I think stuff like that's funny. Like, I'm just going to virtue signal on Twitter. And I mean, like, I guess Twitter is all for virtue signaling, but I think stuff like that is funny. Like, especially Emmett McFarlane, I think is his name, the U of Waterloo, not Western, Waterloo. And he gets on there and gets all indignant. He called for the burning down of Congress before Trump was allowed to do, the Supreme Court justice, right? Burn Congress down to prevent Trump from getting his Supreme Court justice. People are crazy. Like, that is a crazy thing to say. That is not grounded in normal, everyday, like, political discord. No, calling for the destruction of an entire arm of the U.S. government, and neither is this. This is totally tone deaf for a political science person, right? If you don't completely agree with what we want you to agree with, you are pathetic effer. Effer, E-F-F-E-R. Okay, Rocco Galati says, near treasonous constitutional violation of the abdication and duty to govern. Here is abdication, not abdication, abdication and duty to govern. So Rocco Galati saying that Doug Ford saying that if you ignore your medical officer of health, you're committing political suicide is handing over the reins of governing the province to the medical officer of health. Here's what Doug Ford said.
I'm going to be very frank. There's no politician in this country who's going to disagree with their chief medical officer. They just aren't going to do it. They might as well throw a rope around their neck and jump off a bridge. They're done. I'm telling you the facts. It's very simple.
I've played that before. I don't like the imagery that's invoked by Ford there. And not that I don't think... I think that he's wrong. I think that there's a huge appetite for people to hear politically. Lockdowns are wrong. What we're doing is wrong. Vaccine passports are wrong. They shouldn't be implemented. Aaron O'Toole, just like Andrew Scheer, is silent on these things. And that's going to continue, right? Here's Tony Hiller. And actually, the response is what I wanted to highlight. These are the UK stats for the last 50 years. Here's the evidence it's not a pandemic. If you look at the total deaths as a percentage of population over the last 50 years, 2020 came at the 35th worst year. So why haven't the other 34 years been a pandemic? The percent of population dead, right? Right? 35th worst year, right? 1976 was worse, 72, 79, 73. 85, 78, 74, 75. The 70s were an awful time to live. 1970, 1982, 1980, 1983, 1981. All of these were more deadly years in Britain. So no pandemic then. It's sad what lies have done, right? News release, Justice Centre defends charter freedoms from Ontario government enforcement against churches. So we're trying to get people back in churches. I think that it's horrendous that we need to go to court to reestablish our basic rights. That's terrible. The Toronto News, Rowan was out at the protests on the weekend, on Saturday, and he said he wanted to know why the Toronto police weren't covering it. 1,500 people out, and they're not the Toronto police, the Toronto press, and they're not covering it because they don't want people to know about it, Rowan. That's why they're not covering it, and they're not going to cover it. If it was a Black Lives Matter rally, they would cover it because they want people to know about it, but they're not covering it because they don't want people to know about it. That's the whole thing. I understand. but that's what they're doing. Here's Quebec as well. Thousands protest Quebec's COVID-19 lockdown measures, several arrests made. Montreal police. What do they want you to know about here? What do you think they want you to know about here? It's the arrests made part. They're trying to chill the protests down. They don't want people protesting. Here's this is March 13, 2021. So this isn't yesterday. But we've seen lots and lots of footage over the last couple of last couple of days, week or so, of protests happening across Europe, and very heavy-handed police using force to beat protesters, et cetera, and arrest people who aren't wearing masks. They did not do this during the Black Lives Matter protests last year. I wonder if there'll be Black Lives Matter protests this year, or if that was just meant to incite these protests. I think we have to be smarter. There's a better way to do it. I could be wrong. There's a better way to do it. I'm sure I've seen, and I wish that I saved this. I wish that I wrote down when I saw this, but I think it was in a World War II series of Time Life World War II series. But in Poland, when they were occupied by Nazi Germany, at 11 o'clock, they all stopped at 11 o'clock for a minute, and they didn't do anything. And it was withholding work for that 1 minute to protest what the government is doing. And it spread. They would literally stop walking on the street, all this stuff. I'm not saying that we should do that, but that's in my opinion would be more effective, because everybody can join in, and it's not a little thing, but it's not something the police can arrest you for either, right? That was why it was effective against the Gestapo, because they couldn't stop them really. It was a minute, right? Anyway, well, they could stop them, I suppose, but they couldn't stop all of them. So we have to be smarter. We have to be smarter than this. We have to think our way out of this, because this is the response. They want to provoke a side so they can say this group of people are white supremacists, and we need powers to take action against these white supremacists before it gets to this point. They use it to justify further crackdowns, and the crackdown will be indiscriminate, and it will be on free speech. Be aware. We have to be smarter. We have to be smarter. Come on. Study raises questions about 6 feet of distancing. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues across the globe, the guide to best practices is mostly settled among experts. Mask wearing, distancing, and hand washing. Totally settled, right? Nobody questions it, right? It's settled. Settled science, 99%, 99.9%. However, one area is set to be examined closely is how the virus behaves in school environment. The virus knows it's at school. So everybody put school sign up, and we'll study what it does, what the virus does when it thinks it's at school, right? Okay. According to recent research, when it comes to how much space should be between students, it appears that 3 feet might be as effective as the mandated 6 feet. It's because it's all based on faulty testing. Out of the study, out of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, BIDMC in Boston, and published in the Journal of Clinical Infectious Diseases, focused specifically on finding the optimal physical distance that would limit the spread. Researchers compared the rates of COVID-19 cases in students and staff in Massachusetts public schools among districts with universal mask mandates but different physical distancing requirements. Some districts had mandated 6 feet, and others had a 3-foot rule. The study found no substantial difference in the number of cases in the districts with a 3-foot rule versus those with a 6-foot rule, suggesting different physical distancing policies could potentially be adopted in school settings with masking mandates without negatively impacting student or staff safety. The researchers used data from 251 Massachusetts school districts, including 537,000 students and about 100,000 teachers, or 100,000 staff who attended in-person instruction during a 16-week period from September 2020 to January 2021. That sounds like pretty good data. Sounds like pretty good data with 3 feet, but I don't even think 3 feet will make a difference. Do you know what the compliance level is in schools with physical distancing at recess? Masks work? Right. Then if masks work, how come whole cohorts are dismissed from class for 2 weeks at a time after a COVID case is found? If masks work. Morons. Conservative Party getting into the election, because it looks like they're gearing up for election. Conservative Party says stand with Aaron to secure Canada's future, right? And here's stand with Aaron, right? I still don't get the blue upside down U on future going into the U. I don't understand. Is that like some kind of conservative dog whistle? Like the one U entering the other? Is that for like a standard family? Is that for some kind of gender thing? What are you doing with the U, man? I'm just imagining some people being outraged for some, you're conservative, and so I'm outraged. Canada's recovery plan: secure jobs, secure accountability, secure mental health, secure the country, secure our economy. The secure jobs one, he says, by recovering 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic in 1 year. So the goal is 1 million jobs in a year. I think I heard this before, like in every election since 2012, I guess. 1 million new jobs, right? Okay. Secure accountability by enacting a new anti-corruption law to clean up the mess in Ottawa. An anti-corruption law. Great. Secure mental health through our Canadian Mental Health Action Plan. Oh, those details are stunning and brave, right? Secure the country by creating a strategic stockpile of essential products and building the capacity to manufacture vaccines at home. Secure the country and no mention of China? Huh. Secure our economy by balancing the budget over the next decade. Oh my goodness, I should have had this queued up. I fail every time. The next decade. The next decade, is that good? Jagmeet Singh, that's the platform. That's the platform. As deep as cereal milk. Okay, Jagmeet Singh has said the NDP government would forgive up to $20,000 in debt for those with student loans. Do you have student loans? Vote for the NDP and they'll get rid of them for you, right? Oh, this was supposed to be a Poilievre tweet. Hold on a second. Here's Gerald Butts and Pierre Poilievre going at it on Twitter on March 20th. I thought it was an interesting little Twitter back and forth. Not that big a deal. I mean, like, Butts is just trying to make himself politically relevant. I mean, he's always giving advice to Trudeau, or he was years ago. And since being removed from office, he snipes on Twitter now and then. And I mean, it's just interesting, right? He shows up around election times. So I don't know. Indication. This is a kind of funny one. This is another one from Mr. Poilievre. He asks the Wee brothers, how much did you pay the Trudeaus, Trudeau's mother, brother, and Trudeau himself, in goods and also payment? So he gives the Wee brothers give him the payment numbers, and then also he says, yeah, but like, what about the hotel stays and the food and the expenses and all that? How much was that? And they say, oh, well, we paid for that. Here, I'll get to that part because that I thought was super funny. Here it is. Sorry if it's quiet, but here we go.
Dollar value, including expenses.
We never gave this to them. We paid those expenses directly, of course.
Right, for them.
We didn't give that. We paid like the hotel bill when they stayed, or the
That's right.
Was coming.
That's right.
Expenses would have been over roughly, oh my gosh, we're doing this for you. 36.
It's so much money you can't even keep track of it all.
There was 42 events. It was a total of $209,000.
So that's the expenses, $209,000. But the funny part for me was the part where he's like, how much was the expenses and everything combined? And he was like, no, we paid for that. Yeah, we know you paid for that. We get it. Thought it was super funny. Okay, moving into line 5. This is one that I've been talking about a lot. In this interview, the interviewee says that he doesn't think that the governor has the legal authority to shut down the pipeline. But I think that Biden's transportation guy, I think that's Buttigieg, is totally on board and agrees with Whitmer to shut it down. So I hope we don't have a shutdown pipeline in May. But these guys seem kind of pseudo sure of themselves. Hold on. Here, I'll get it queued up. Okay, we're all queued up. Here we go. She asks, how likely is it are we going to shut down this pipeline? And he says, no, I don't think so. But I don't know. Here we go.
From your perspective, how likely is it that your company is going to have to shut this down in a couple of months?
We think the chance of an immediate shutdown in the near term is extremely remote. The governor doesn't actually have jurisdiction to do that. So we believe her actions are unlawful and not within the law. So we plan to continue to operate the pipeline until we get a court order that would ask us to shut the pipeline down.
So you need not just what she's done so far, Governor Whitmer's done so far, but from your perspective, there needs to be a specific injunction or court order to force that shutdown to happen. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you have any idea if that's being sought, or what can you share with us on that front?
Well, right now, the governor has no avenue to pursue a specific injunction at that while this is being held at federal court. So we've basically said that the regulation of pipelines in the United States is a federal jurisdictional issue, and our regulator is a division of the U.S. Department of Transportation, and that agency is the only agency that has the power to ask a pipeline to be shut down. So we want the federal court to confirm that, and we're working through that process. So until that's determined, really, there's no avenue for an immediate shutdown of the pipeline.
Let me ask you more broadly.
So that's interesting, right? So it's held up until the court makes a decision on this jurisdiction issue. Until then, the Governor Whitmer can't request the shutdown. So, but she could if the court comes back and says that she has the jurisdiction. But if it comes back and says that it's the federal, then I guess it defaults. And I think it's Buddy Gig, but I could be wrong. I think that's Biden's transportation cabinet member, but I could be wrong. So maybe things will carry on as normal with the impending doom kind of potentially there hanging for a while, right? It might go down in any minute, but maybe not. We better not do anything about it. Let's not build something else to a backup or something like that. Can't build pipelines in Canada. That's not politically savvy, right? Right. Holly Doan says, if these experts were doing a terrific job, we wouldn't have among the highest cell phone bills in the world. Commons Industry Committee will hold hearings on Rogers' $26 billion purchase of Shaw. So, remember the 25% reduction in your cell phone bill? Not so much, not happening so much. And now Rogers is consolidating its hold on moving out west, expanding out west, because Rogers was traditionally, Ontario and some in Quebec maybe, but maybe it's a different brand in Quebec. So that's interesting. Interesting that the regulators are getting in on that. I expect it to be approved. Honestly, I don't think that the regulators are going to stop Rogers from this acquisition. Here's Pierre Poilievre. He says, central bankers told us that printing money would make housing affordable. Instead, this Ottawa family shed tears from losing 9 bids, once bidding $400,000 above asking price for a house that went for $125 million, $1.25 million, my bad, in the once affordable middle class neighborhood of Riverside South. Own a mansion, your net worth is ballooning. Seeking a modest bungalow, you're getting poorer by the day. Ottawa couple bids $400,000 over asking price and loses as housing market remains hot. That's saying it. David Jacobs says you can't have it both ways. Either mortgage payments are tax deductible or capital gains from the sale of your home, sale of your primary residence are tax free. If you do it any other way, in 3 generations, no one in Canada will own a home. Is that what they want? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right? Michael Korvig, accused by China of spying, faces a trial. That was 4 hours ago. The trial is over, so I've heard already. Hold on, my tabs have gone to sleep. 3 hours ago, Nathan Vanderkleep says, court statement says Korvig trial has been held, verdict at a later date. I actually saw this one before I saw this one. I saw this one just before I was starting my show. So I thought, wow, okay, that book ends quite nicely. Oh, I thought this one loaded. Diplomats and media being kept outside at Michael Korvig's trial, which is scheduled to start in 15 minutes. This is 14 hours ago. 34 diplomats. Where's Canada's diplomat? Is he there? Is there any statement from him? No? Here is General Vance. This is a little bit of more fleshing out details. Obviously, we're very concerned. Prime Minister and Defense Minister have said we recognize the need to have a robust review of these allegations. Who reviews Harjit Sajjan and Justin Trudeau for role ignoring allegations and mandates? Nobody, right? Canada's feminist Prime Minister Trudeau taking care of another of his feminist friends. Trudeau approved a performance pay for Vance after office aware of misconduct allegations. Oh, sure. $50,000 performance bump? Why not? Sure. This probably won't come out, and if it does, you'll be well retired by then, right? There you go. This is how liberal feminists help women in the military because they really care about women. MPs want answers on why the Liberal government approved a raise for General Jonathan Vance despite allegations. Yeah, that'd be nice to know. Eh? Critical race theory is infecting every single facet of our modern society. They're pushing back in the United States. They're naming it and saying this is racist and we're not allowed to do this here. Not in Canada, not so much. Racism affects everyone, says the Guelph Police Service. On this International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Guelph Police stands with the UN to fight racism. And I said, fight racism in any form, eh? You lack the courage of your convictions. Nobody wants to engage with the obviously racist Upper Grand District School Board staff and their racist statements, their blatant racist statements to the board. Nobody wants to deal with that. I think it's funny. And not that John Tory should deal with that, but I think Guelph Police, Mayor Guthrie, right? We stamp out racism in every form, except for a couple of forms that are pointed out to us regularly at the Upper Grand District School Board. Sure. Ryan O'Connor says, the hopes and dreams of hundreds or thousands of new Canadian restaurateurs in Toronto have been shattered by Mayor John Tory's stubborn refusal to allow indoor dining for 6 months. But please tell us more about your performative fight for equity with hashtags. John Tory says, on Racial Discrimination Day, we must recommit ourselves to fight racism. Our work to end racism, hate, and discrimination is far from over. Today, we take a stand and pledge to take further action to eradicate it. I would support any politician that said, I am not going to use bullshit platitudes and garbage, made up talking points and made up days to push my ideology. I'm just going to fix the potholes and deal with the problems that are apparent in our city. Not prioritizing by race, not prioritizing by equity. All of this shit is distractionary, and it sucks resources from the places that need the attention. That's the play. That's the plan. Okay? And even the COVID-19 thing that they did in Toronto with Mayor Tory doing the Nathan Phillips Square candlelit vigil, virtual candlelit vigil thing. That's divisive and taking away resources from the places that they should be. It costs money to do that. It's a public display. It's time and energy from the mayor and from all sorts of people who should be focused on solving problems, not on putting on public displays like that. When's the last time we put on a public display for a flu? Right? Like it's just wild. It's just very interesting that there's no lighting candles for flu and pneumonia patients, right? Like all these losses are tragedies, right? Because then we get into lighting candles for cancer patients, lighting candles for heart condition patients. Like it's a slippery, crazy slope, and they're using it to drive a political wedge, and it's working because if you don't get on board with it, man, you're a COVIDiot or something like that. It's crazy. Last story of the day has nothing to do with racism or anything like that. President Trump is building his own social media platform. It's official. Haha, the plan all of a sudden becomes clear. 4 years of presidency to beat Twitter at its own game. No? I don't know. I'll see what Trump's social network has to offer. I can't see. Listen, the reason people are on Twitter is because people are on Twitter, right? Like if the swimming pool's on Twitter and the school board is on Twitter and the specific trustees are on Twitter, et cetera, and they're not on Gab or they're not on Parler or whatever Trump wants to call his thing, then Twitter will remain popular. Now, Trump has a lot of sway and a lot of draw. It could be a popular thing, might be great, might be super fun, right? But the internet as it was in 2012, in 2008 to 2012, excuse my stutter, is gone, I think, and it's not coming back, right? And Twitter is a place where they silence free speech. The internet is now a place where they silence speech they don't like. And if you're a target of that, you don't have a recourse. There's no internet bill of rights. You don't have a say, right? The corporations that own this internet, the server farms, the Google, the underpinnings of all of this stuff has been bought out from under the public. We don't have a say in this, right? They have a say in this. And we can maybe somewhat regulate, but the government has realized that they can regulate without talking to us. And they're doing it. And they're doing it in a way that harms us. And that's happening at an increased rate, right? Like, and it's not good. It's not good for anybody. But it solidifies their power, and it makes it so that people don't even question their power, right? When the top 3, 4, 500 pages of Google search results are garbage articles that back up the narrative. Why? Because they've got AI writing it. They can churn out as many as they like. It's a crazy, crazy, sick world, and the way out of this, we have to be smarter than them. We have to think our way out of it. And right now we're not. Right now we're chasing our tails because they tell us to, because there's a scary virus around. So that's where we're at. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful